name is Jose Castro, and it's a privilege to be here as your MC for this evening, this very special evening, which we honor a very special person. But before we get to that, a few housekeeping details. If you would, please take a moment to shut your phones off so that we don't have any interruptions. And second, please, no videotaping of the audio, video, or any of this. This event is so popular, Taylor Swift couldn't get tickets to it. And Martin is still negotiating the rights with the movie studios for the production of this. That's why we can't let anybody video it. So with that set aside, I'm honored to be here to serve on this special day in which we come to recognize, honor, and pay tribute. I think that's play next door. That's not our music, that's for sure. So that we come here to recognize, honor, and pay tribute to a woman who has had a tremendous impact on the indigenous community throughout California for the past 70 years. And more importantly, for over 50 years right here in Sacramento. That special person that I speak about sits right here with us in the front row. Our guest of honor, Angelbertha Cobb. So you get her up, she's going to want to dance. In honor of her today, and out of respect for her first language, the slave language, the first one, we will be using some Nahuatl words, and we will be explaining what those words are to you. And let me tell you, I've been her student 50 years ago at DQ University. Don't be surprised if she doesn't stop you in that hallway and ask you a pop quiz about, well, what did that word mean? And how do you say that word? And she's famous for doing that. On a serious note, before we begin, I want to let you know that there was a very deliberate decision that was made by Teatro Espejo Board, that in light of the person that we are honoring here today, this would not be a typical theatrical performance, but instead a Mawitzili, Lateo Matilitzili, honoring ceremony. In keeping with the tradition of the sacred ceremony, we always begin by a smudge to purify our hearts and to purify our minds before we go into a sacred space. That's what you experienced as you came in the door today. The other thing we do is by the calling of the four directions. For this, we would ask that our honored guest, Mama Cobb, come forward to lead us in the calling of the four directions, along with her Atipolero, Manuel Pickett. That's the person that blows the conch to call Deo, our creator, our ancestors, and the sacred four directions.
First, thank you to everybody who's here. And since I nothing to do with what is supposed to be the salute of the four directions, I'm not doing them anymore. But the Xochitl is going to do the honor to do it the right way, because she can do it now.
In keeping with our tradition, please stand and face the four directions as we hear the Poli. Starting with the east. Please be seated. We'd like to say, Claso Kamati. Thank you, Mama Cobb, Manuel. And I can assure you, Claso Kamati will be on the pop quiz. So remember that. In keeping with the indigenous theme, instead of clapping, what a lot of the nations do up here is they say, oh. And when you have a lot of respect for someone, you raise your hands high. So that salute and that appreciation for them is raised to the Creator. So to get us started with that, let's hear a big oh for Mama Cobb and Manuel Pickett. Oh! Yeah. Over the next hour and a half, we pay our respects to Mama Cobb for her reclamation, restoration, and preservation of indigenous knowledge, culture, and spirituality. Now it is my honor to introduce someone, a very special someone, here with us today. Senora Graciela Ramirez, an accomplished poet and co-founder of Los Escritores del Sol, who have maintained Chicano and Latino poetry for over 50 years. She will read a special poem that she has composed for Mama Cobb. Oh.
Event. Honoring Mrs. Cobb is something that we Chicanos should have been doing this every year or every month of the year. Because Mrs. Cobb is such an important person for our culture, for all of us, and for the future generations. So here's the poem. To Mrs. Cobb. I see her as a child, her little body moving to musical rhythms, listening to Jessica's, her beloved teacher, showing all the movements that follow the rotations of our mother earth. Ooh, I see Mrs. Cobb as a young and vibrant woman, teaching many children about their own roots, love for books and learning, respect for who they are, choreographic dancing, stories and songs. I see Mrs. Cobb designing outfits, Rasta outfits for girls and for boys, working days and nights, surrounded by the colors of rainbow-hued materials all over her house, spread on floors, hanging on walls. I see Mrs. Cobb sewing pretty dresses, pants and hats for boys, for the presentations, houses for their rituals, for monsters and elders, for their ceremonies like Shilonian Day. I see Mrs. Cobb at the cemetery every day of the dead, doing the four directions, leading all about, in visiting the graves of children and adults up to the main altar. I see Mrs. Cobb teaching college classes, sharing all her knowledge on Mexican culture, accepting invitations from college professors, Sac State and Davis, and other schools. I see Mrs. Cobb, even in her 90s, dressing little dolls in Mexican outfits, like pretty jarochas or chinas pobladas, preserving our culture in pieces of love. So that's for you, Mrs. Cobb.
Oh! Let's look at and see, beat me to it. Big O! Thank you for those beautiful words. At this time, we want to offer a land acknowledgement so that we never forget we are on occupied land. The original inhabitants, it's been taken from them, but we still recognize it. So with that, I'd like to read this. We, the participants of this very special honoring ceremony, do hereby acknowledge that we are on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Nisea and Miwok people, who are the original inhabitants of this land. As the indigenous stewards of this land, and in accordance with their traditions, they have never ceded, lost, or forgotten their responsibilities as caretakers of Tonatzin Tlali, our venerable Mother Earth. And in an act of appreciation on our behalf, we pay our respects to their ancestors, to their elders, to their members, and their relations for 7 generations to come, by affirming their sovereign right as first people of this land. Oh! Given the depth and breadth of Mama Cobb's impact on so many different areas, and given the limited time that we have the theater, we had to limit the testimonies to 5 sectors. Education, which you all know is very high and important to her. The community, Mexica ceremonias, and Mexica danza. With that being said, now let's go back in time to October 1st, 1932. When Sra. Maria Concepcion was giving birth to twins in the village of Chiloshichico, Mexico. She's still my teacher. I gotta look for her to make sure I got her approval that I said it. All was going well as planned. The first birth was to a boy who was named Iheka because of the fierce winds at the time. Then the birth of the girl, Aquacine, because of the hard rain. With the delivery of both children, everyone was grateful and thanked Deo for the health of the mother and the twins. Thinking that the pregnancy was complete, Maria went to stand up, when all of a sudden, something fell to the floor. She screamed and everyone came running. When they looked, there lying on the ground was the third baby. They had names for the twins, but not for the unexpected third child. As was tradition with the Mexica people at that time, Maria's father took note of the elements that were present: the wind, the rain, and eventually a rainbow. And so he named her Osamayo Xihuatlali, Rainbow Woman of the Earth, affectionately known to us nowadays, Mama Cobb.
Oh.
Oh, Mama Cobb. That was a big one. Boy, I really appreciate you.
That was his great grandson.
Oh, that makes sense. And then before we started, I was outside, and I thought, how fitting that here a woman that was born during the wind, the rain, that we should be honoring her, whether there's wind and rain taking place right now. To me, that tells me that your brother and sister are here. And eventually, later on today, we know that that rainbow will be showing.
Oh.
Everybody beating me to my script. Now fast forward to the present. As moderator, before I introduce each of our presenters, I will be sharing a quote or a thought that captures the essence of Mama Cobb. And I did forget one thing, so I ask your forgiveness. And that was back at the very beginning, and I don't want to miss this because it's a very important element to what we're talking about. That I want you to know that a very deliberate decision was made by Teatro Espejo board. That in light of this person we are honoring here today, this isn't a theatrical performance. It's a spiritual ceremony. So now, let's begin. Our first quote is, Theo, Creator, help me live in ways that my ancestors would be proud. And I know we all agree that Mama Cobb has done just that. Our first presenter has had a front row seat to witness the tireless efforts Mama Cobb has devoted to numerous community organizations that I am sure have pleased our ancestors. Please join me in welcoming Xochitl Ariano.
Mali Tornali. Buenas tardes. Good afternoon, everyone. If you will permit me to just say a few words about how I came to this country, ¿verdad? Poquito. Mi nombre es Xochitl. My name is Xochitl. And that is how it is pronounced in the beautiful language, Nahuatl language. And I did not know that until a few years ago. I was born in Mexico, Tenochtitlan, under the volcano Popocatépetl. And I left with my family to the U.S. when I was 9 years old. And I returned summers and Christmas, and always La Familia. But there was never a link to my culture, to the name connected to that culture. There was never a link. I love my name. My father wanted 3 boys to give them Aztec warrior names. And he got 3 girls. And I was the last one, and I got the Aztec name. So I was very happy. There's always a reason to talk about our cultura when I would say my name. When I was about 14 in Mexico with my mother, I heard her say to my tía Carmen, ahí está el chiquihuite. And quickly my tía said, Tere, así no se dice. Se dice cesto. That made me feel very uncomfortable and very embarrassed for my mother. And it marked me. My mother had used a Spanish word. I'm sorry. My mother had used an indigenous Nahuatl word. And she was shunned for it. The word chiquihuitl, original, and the Nahuatlismo, chiquihuite, which is Basque. And that marked me as we moved to Sacramento in 1977. It made me feel very uncomfortable knowing that my mother felt bad and not knowing why that was not okay. When we arrived here in Sacramento in 1977, I quickly connected to the Centro de Artistas Chicanos, where I discovered so much more in Xochitl, in Picatl. And then there was Senora Cobb. I connected with her during a beauty contest, Reina de las Fiestas Patrias. The prize was a trip back to Mexico City. So I quickly entered. I didn't win, but it